another Thursday night episode of Real Monsters. I am your host, S.K. Barrett, and joining me as always, the lovely and talented Wes Hobrick.
You can call me the beggar and hanger on of the. uh, man.
20th episode tonight, dude.
20th,
Yep,
indeed.
yep.
And
Uh,
another anniversary, too, as people
yes,
can see from the graphic.
yeah. Tonight, today, is the 50th anniversary of the Tate murders by the Charles Manson family.
Yep. It was, well, technically the 8th to the 9th. They were killed close to midnight, but we'll get into that. Close to midnight on the 9th. But
Yeah.
yeah, there is just
So,
so much
yeah,
information.
let's just dive right the hell in. So
That is,
where do you want to start? What's our context here?
I think that it's vital when you're looking at this to start with the history of the time,
Okay.
to the atmosphere
Yes,
of
yes.
what's going on.
I agree.
It's the 60s. There's massive upheaval all over the country. There's civil unrest. There's the Watts riots in Los Angeles in 65, I believe that was. There's revolutionary music. There's rock and roll, man. It's that
Y-
was birthed and it defined so much of that era, and it also defined the crime, as we'll be getting into it. Um, there's hippies, there's free love, there's drugs,
There's riots.
yes, sex, communes, and actually, Woodstock 69 is a week from today, 50 years ago. And it's kind of interesting because you have these murders that we'll be talking about that represent sort of the id of the love generation going wild, as they were called by the coroner of the time, an orgy of blood. And we will be showing some pictures that might be hard to swallow for some. Um, we've done our best to censor certain parts of that, but we
Yeah.
wanted to give the warning before we get into it. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's the context, man. It's LA, it's Hollywood.
Vietnam War. Um,
Yep, the Vietnam War. Um, Kennedy
Kent
assassination, not too far before this.
and Martin Luther King.
Bobby Kennedy too.
Yep.
JFK and RFK. Yep.
Watts riots. There was Kent State. There was a lot of bad shit going on.
Yep.
And
A lot of it.
you know, oh, the LSD guy. Who was what was his name again?
Timothy Leary.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Timothy Leary. And, you had a lot of kids that I think were really questioning the values that they thought their parents taught, that their country taught, and what it stood for. And they're looking for, new stuff. They have good intentions, I think, for the most part. And they're sort of searching, you know? They're sort of aimless. They're sort of vagabonds throughout the culture. And that is really where Charles Manson fits into this. Um, a bit about his history. In 1967, he was just getting out of prison for a 7-year stint for forgery and parole violations. So, what's he do? He hears about the hippie mecca of Haight Ashbury in San Francisco, heads there with his guitar because he is a musician, and he just sort of stands out on the corners and plays. And this is how he starts collecting people into what would become a family.
Right. So I think it's interesting to point out that this guy, he's pretty much started life as a petty criminal.
He did. The first crime that he was on record as committing was he was 12 years old, robbed a grocery store. He was born in November 1934 in Cincinnati. His mother was a petty thief, in and out of jail quite a bit, and I think she was brought up on prostitution charges a
Oh,
number of times. But
I think that does sound familiar.
um, but yeah, he
And
followed in
she
her
was she
footsteps.
an alcoholic? Kelly wants to know.
Uh, I think so. That part I'm not sure of, but yeah, she's definitely a shady character, to put it mildly,
Right.
out there.
He hasn't been taught Law and Order and
No,
towing the line and that kind of shit.
no, not at all.
Yeah.
At age 13, he commits his first armed robbery. I guess that when he burgled the grocery store at age 12, it wasn't armed. I don't
Well,
know how he
burglary
did
means
that, but
it kind of implies this place was closed at the time.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I, and I don't know. But yeah, and throughout this time when he's growing up, he gets brought up on, as we said, forgery charges. Forging government checks was the other big thing that he was into.
Ah.
And he was also brought up for a time on transporting a woman across state lines for the purposes of prostitution. But in his time in 1967, he's 32. He spent 17 years of his life in jails and reformatories.
That's over half his life, including all of his
Yeah,
childhood years.
exactly. I mean, I'm not saying that we should feel any pity for this guy, but that's
No.
just a truism of his history. Um, but yeah, also when he was in prison, he raped a inmate at the point of a razor blade.
Oh.
So you have that too.
So, yeah, all around good guy. Just misunderstood.
Ugh. Oh yeah, may he rot in hell right now. But yeah, in 1967, he starts collecting his family in San Francisco at Haight-Ashbury, and he sort of drifts and rambles on down to Los Angeles, to Hollywood, where he has these dreams of being a recording star. And in the process, he picks up some people who are going to be very pivotal for the later crimes. So,
Yeah.
like, and it's interesting to look at their psychology too. Tex Watson, who was one that was very pivotal with the Tate
Right.
murders, he was, an A student in Texas, and he was a star athlete.
Not the
Susan
kind you think to
Atkins,
be a mass murderer.
exactly. Yeah, Susan Atkins was a homecoming queen. Uh, Patricia Krenwinkel, she was the daughter of a wealthy insurance executive in Los Angeles. And,
Hmm.
all these women found their way to him, and he manipulated them in ways that we'll be talking about into committing murder, amongst many, many other things. But, is interesting. In my research, I was listening to John Douglas speak about this, and he was one of the founders of the FBI's profiling school of the BAU,
Yeah.
the Behavioral Analysis Unit.
Yeah.
He actually interviewed Manson 3 times for
Mm.
purposes of psychological research. But he found that the one way that Manson learned how to manipulate women specifically was talking to pimps in prison.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and picking up these tricks, these subtle psychological tricks that he would use. Because, most of these pimps are, not good looking guys. They look like shit. And
Right.
still they're able to um, get
And
these women.
and it's not just it can't just be about their physical size. By the way, Manson's a little guy,
Yes.
diminutive
Yes.
even. He's like
I
5'2".
That's what I was going to ask if you had gotten his height, his
I got
exact
it
height.
off of I
Yeah.
got it off of a mugshot.
Oh, yeah. I can remember if I included that one in there. I purposely wanted to just include what we needed of Manson in there because, frankly, he gets way too much acclaim from the culture, in my opinion. Um, but yeah, they get down to LA around this time, and they make their way to an old movie set, Spawn Ranch, where they would shoot westerns way back when. And when we'll be getting into the pictures here, I got a few of those.
Oh, so I'm sorry, I lost my track. So the pimp thing is
Oh,
really important.
yeah,
A lot of pimps are obviously able to physically dominate the women, but that's only once they're under their thumb.
yep.
It
Oh,
takes
absolutely.
charm first and other techniques.
That it does, and yeah, I'm just thinking of all that. There's so much to go through, but yeah, to answer Kelly's question, we're going to be getting into this with the musical
The
history.
music is
So
a big deal for sure.
yes, a very big deal, and that was actually the other main thing when they were down in L.A. Dennis Wilson, one of the founders of the Beach Boys, ended up picking Patricia Krenwinkel and another girl from the family up hitchhiking on, I think it was Venice Beach, where he found them. And that was how he, got connected to Charlie later on. And Charlie and a bunch of the other family members went to his house to stay for as long as they could, his house on Sunset Boulevard. And basically, what Manson would do there, he was keeping them happy with women and free drugs. And that was a big
Yeah,
reason that he stayed as long as he did. Um, and yeah, it's really interesting.
which is
Dennis
also
Wilson,
how he stayed on the ranch.
yeah, yeah. Well, and with that, the Spahn Ranch is owned by this. I think he's 81,
Yeah.
George Spahn. His eyesight was failing. He's an old man doddering around this huge movie set ranch with only a few ranch hands giving tours and keeping the place up. So basically, what Manson does is goes in there and he says, I can give you people to, work on it and women to service the old man's needs, as it were. Um,
Yeah, we got a picture of him. Let me pull it up separately. There he is.
we're pulling up George, are we?
Yeah.
Man, I think I might have frozen. Stupid YouTube. Reloading. I so need to get a new browser. Yeah, there is George. That part in Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Burt Reynolds was going to play George Spahn, but
Yeah.
he died halfway through filming. And they replaced him with Bruce Dern in it.
Oh, that's so good.
Oh, Bruce Dern is excellent.
He
Love
is
him as an actor, too.
he's one of the most he's a actor that I hate every character he plays because he's that uh, but that's what you're supposed to do, right?
Yeah,
He never
yeah,
plays a
yeah.
nice guy.
Oh, not at all. Man. Yeah, I was just thinking, did you see Chappaquiddick with him?
Yes.
As
Yes.
Joseph Kennedy, man,
Yeah.
he had very few lines, but his presence in that was just amazing. So,
Oh, I take it back. There was one movie where he was the good guy, and it was Silent Running, about that
oh,
spaceship with all of the last of the Earth's um, flora on it.
yeah, wow. Uh, yeah, so, they're on the ranch and getting into 1969 to get an idea of just how big the family had grown as they're, sort of rambling around LA and picking people up. There was 32 adults and 7 children on it in 1969 that they counted. But yeah, so they have this connection with Dennis Wilson, and Dennis Wilson actually recorded Charlie on a
Yep.
few songs,
Right.
um, as Kelly said. I
So
believe
so
that was,
this is
uh,
there's a couple of points in here that that saying that the gates of history swing on tiny hinges
Hmm.
or something to that effect. And you know, there's at least there's two in particular that I want to point out. And one is the picking up of the hitchhiker that connected him to Brian Wilson
Hmm.
was the first linchpin to the
Dennis
Tate murder.
Wilson.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that was the first linchpin.
It was.
And I'll bring up the second one when we come upon it. But that was, that was an one of those tiny little moments that nobody thinks about until looking back, where you know just so easy for it to not happen at all.
Hmm. Oh
And
yeah.
but because of that, it set in motion a million other little things that um, led to the murders.
It's interesting to think about it that way. If one little event hadn't happened,
Yeah,
where would we be?
yeah,
Dang. But yeah, I mean that it was through Dennis Wilson. He actually took some recording equipment out to Spahn Ranch to record Charlie. And if I'm not mistaken, he actually used it was Brian's recording equipment at his house, so he took him there too
I thought it was
to record
Dennis's.
some of. Oh, maybe it was his own. I was thinking it was somebody's recording
Yeah,
equipment. So
Dennis Wilson actually was the bigger fan of Charlie's music, I think.
he absolutely was. There's a really interesting documentary that I found on Amazon that was about this. It's called The Beach Boys and Satan, and it gets into all these connections. But yeah, during that time, Dennis was kind of getting dissatisfied with the direction that the band was going in. Because you had him starting off sort of clean cut in the early '60s, and
Yeah,
then you had Pet Sounds, the
right.
album Pet Sounds, coming out around '66, where they were doing some more experimentation. And Wilson, he kind of wanted more of that. Yeah, he was kind of looking for a creative oasis, if you will, and just wasn't finding it, it seemed. But it was through Dennis Wilson that Charlie got introduced to Terry Melcher, Doris Day's son and the record producer. He had done huge acts like the Byrds
Yeah.
and many, many others. Paul Revere and the Raiders were another one. And, Terry, being the producer type, says, okay, I'll give you a listen, Charlie. We'll
Hmm.
see if you're any good, and I'll call you back. So, he comes out to Spahn Ranch once and listens to him and does that, and evidently he really didn't like what he heard, but he was trying to be polite about it and said, yeah, I'll call you. Don't call me, I'll call you.
Yeah, in Hollywood parlance, and in a lot of business, which Charlie had no experience at all with, I'll
Hmm.
call you is a brush off.
Yes,
That means
exactly.
that means I won't call you is what it actually means. Um,
Yeah.
but he
Yeah,
didn't
not
know
trying to
that.
be an asshole. No. No, I mean with Manson, again, we're talking about a guy who's 17 years in jails. Your word was your bond. That's really,
Yeah, you break your word, you get beat up or worse.
yeah. Oh, exactly.
But that's not LA, right?
Oh, no, not at all.
LA,
Not at all.
nobody tells the truth in LA in the media businesses. If you tell the truth, it's only by accident that somebody actually tells the truth. The only truth is in the contract.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's a whole, industry that is in essence built on lies,
Yeah,
movies and, music. It's sort of what they do. And if you're good at it, in my opinion, you use lies to tell the truth in, let's say, a movie.
right.
But Um, yeah, that's a picture of Spawn Ranch he had there. The
Yep.
one that was an aerial shot was Spawn Ranch as well.
And what surprised me is it's not like way off in the hills. It's just off the highway. You know,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's isolated, but it's
it's
not
not
isolated enough.
right. It's not you got to go out this. It's hell. It's not like a Texas ranch that you can't even see from the highway.
Oh, exactly.
It's just
Yeah.
right there.
I mean, it was isolated enough. It's about 25 miles from downtown LA, about 25 miles north of it. And, that's one thing that he did use to his advantage in manipulating these people further was
Mm.
that isolation, that little bit of isolation.
Right. Isolation is a key element for cult leaders.
Yep. That and, um, I guess we could get into that later if you want. I was just thinking about his other methods of manipulation. Do we want to talk about that now?
Yeah.
um, yeah, he would use, and as we were talking about at the beginning of this, drugs were very common. And most likely the favorite one out there was LSD. And one way that Manson would control the family was giving them more LSD than he himself would take. Or sometimes he wouldn't take any. They would do these trips about 3 to 4 times a week out there.
Jesus.
Yeah. They would drop acid and they would have orgies. And that goes to the second point of how he would control people. Literally, in these orgies, all movements and all lovemaking was directed by Manson. And
Right.
often, what he would do to break these people would be to get them to do something that's opposite of their morality, and that would usually be homosexuality.
And he would use the LSD to get them to cross those boundaries um,
Mm-hmm.
easier, easier to manipulate. And I've never done a hallucinogenic, but I've been
Mm-hmm.
around people, and they are imminently suggestible.
This is true. I the only hallucinogenic I've ever done was morning glory seeds.
Really.
Yeah. I had a lot of those and I was sick for probably a good 3 to 4 days after. And the one thing that I remember about it was a vision, basically a bad trip of my skin falling off.
Well, that would be unpleasant.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I was with
absolutely.
a guy who took mushrooms, and I could just I wouldn't tell him what to see, but I would ask him, "Hey, can you see the air?" And he would go, "Oh, dude, I can totally see the air. Whoa!"
Wow.
It's that easy.
Oh yeah. Man, have never done another one after that. Man, but they would also do mescaline out there was another big one. The active ingredient in peyote, um, hashish, marijuana, of course, but so much of that, and then getting into the sex too was how he would manipulate people.
Yeah. All right. So where are
Um,
we in the timeline? So,
we
so by
are.
the way, so just to summarize, he would use isolation, drugs, and sex, uh, a, and a progression of criminal activity, starting
Yes.
off really minor stuff to
Well, and this is. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, no, it's just you don't take kids off of Haight Ashbury and say, hey, let's go on a killing spree.
Right. Yeah, yeah. You have
You
to
got,
build them up.
yeah, that's a frog that takes a long time to boil.
Oh, absolutely. And I think Charlie knew that really well.
Yeah.
But, it was around this time where Terry Melcher rejected him that the screws started tightening. Um, and in the words of Brian Wilson from that Beach Boys documentary, Dennis was just not hip to the scene anymore with Charlie. He couldn't take it. Charlie was forcing this weird scene on him, and Charlie was out. So what does Manson do after he realizes that? He takes a bullet to Dennis Wilson. Doesn't shoot him, but just hands him a bullet
Yeah.
and says, think about that. So, and after that, it was what sort of drove him to 1050 Cielo Drive as this sort of archetypal archetypal target of the establishment. That was Vincent Bugliosi's theory, the prosecutor throughout the trial of all this,
Yeah.
was that that address at Cielo Drive represented the establishment to Charlie. And he didn't care after he went there and found out that Terry Melcher no longer lived there. He didn't care who the residents were,
Right.
but he
And
knew what he was going to do.
that's the that's the second key point. So Charlie shows up at Melcher's place. He
Mm-hmm.
wants to he wants to try and change his mind, right? But
Mm-hmm.
he finds Sharon in the pool and a photographer.
Yep.
And and the photographer says, "Hey, that guy doesn't live here. He moved 3 months ago." And
Yeah.
he's a little bit of an ass to Charlie.
Yeah. Yeah, and he basically tells him to get the fuck out.
Yeah, get lost, dude.
Yeah.
And that's the second turning point.
It
That's the
really
sec.
is.
If I kind of get the feeling that if the photographer had been more like, yeah, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know where if he was just accommodating a little bit to Manson at that moment, instead of
Mm-hmm.
being a Hollywood asshole to him, that
Yeah.
that maybe things could have been different, or maybe he would have chose a different target. I don't know. But that cemented that address in his mind as representing the enemy.
Exactly. As the
It wasn't
archetype of the establishment that
right.
rejected him.
It wasn't the man. This is weird, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't the
Yeah.
guy. He didn't go say, "Well, I got to find this guy,"
Mm-hmm.
which seems more logical to me in a way. The house
You
didn't
would think
reject him,
so.
right?
Yeah.
The
I
man
mean,
did,
it
but
didn't.
he didn't seem to hold any animosity towards the man himself who turned him down.
No, I mean, he really didn't. You know, honestly, I think if he would have tried hard enough, he likely could have found him.
I'm sure it wasn't
Terry,
very difficult, right?
no, I mean, Melcher was at his mother, Doris Day's beach condo. That's where he moved to, you
Okay.
know. I'm sure it wouldn't have been hard to find, but yeah, Manson goes back to Spawn Ranch and the family, and it sort of slowly starts boiling in him what he's going to do. And this is around the time that honestly, I think he started buying his own bullshit as well.
Yeah.
And that's where it gets into the mythology that Manson created
Well,
for himself and
yeah.
around more of the music of the era, you know?
Yes. Yeah. He thought the White Album was a message to him from the Beatles.
Yes.
Like the
And
whole album.
well, and that's where we were talking about this the other night. Charlie developed this theory that he taught to his family that he was the reincarnation of Christ and the devil all in one.
Well,
I
that's
don't know how that
handy.
works out, but yeah, yeah. You know, he said a lot of it revolved around his name too, Manson, man's son.
Oh,
Um, but going by this, he didn't think that the Beatles were preaching to him from the White Album. He thought the Beatles were conveying his message. So this answers, remember when we were talking off the air about them being emblematic to him of the four evangelists in the Bible?
yes.
that kind of answers that question. He didn't think that they were preaching something to him. He thought they were conveying his message in the White Album.
Ah,
And I don't know if I'm explaining this coherently. That's the problem when you look at this is you can get down these rabbit holes.
yeah, there's not a lot of logic at play here.
No. No, I mean somehow in his deluded mind when he first heard the White Album around November of 68, he thought this and it started boiling in him. And he created this further myth that Helter Skelter, the
Yes,
song that honestly would have been a deep cut on the album if not for Manson, that
right.
Helter Skelter represented an impending race war between what he called the blackies and the whites.
And
And
and and in his mythology, yeah, he believed that he and his followers would hide out during this lengthy race war in
mhm,
a cave
in the desert.
in the desert in Death Valley.
Yeah,
And um, when it was all over, he said the blacks will realize that they
that they
are
can't
that
govern.
they can't are incapable of governing, and they will naturally, of course, naturally turn to Charlie and his followers to
Hmm.
run the world basically on the behalf of the blacks.
To show them how it's done, to
Yeah.
govern them.
Yes.
He thought that the cycles of history were on their side and that the blacks were going to win. Um, yeah, to answer Lewis in the chat, the blackies was Manson's terminology for that, not mine. But yeah, and to answer RC in the chat, I'm doing my best here to make this mythology somewhat coherent so people can understand it. But yeah, to look at a few of the
Well, it's
into
it's it's so ridiculous. It's just if it wasn't for so many tragic deaths, it would be comical because it's just that ridiculous. But
oh,
there's so many
absolutely.
fucking ruined lives because of this lunatic that it's not funny, but it is ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean it really is. He thought they were going to win, but he's a racist, so he thought that, oh, we're going to come out of that hole and govern them. He
Yeah.
connected Revelation chapter 9 to the Beatles' Revolution number 9 from the White Album.
Oh my
And
goodness.
then, just to give kind of a deeper idea of all this here, he thought that the song Blackbird, of course, was about them rising up. Um, and to give real context about that, when the Beatles wrote it, it was to some degree about empowerment of, African Americans and black culture at the time, but
Hmm.
obviously not to the extent that Manson took it. Um, Piggies, another one on there. He thought that represented the basically the bourgeoisie white people.
Yes.
And
Not
and
police,
that
by the
is
way.
gonna yeah, not
There,
police, the white people
yes.
generally. And that is actually going to tie into the La Bianca scene when we get to
and
it, the song
and that
Piggies.
that that those two items and some others actually helped convict them.
It did. And that is a whole other huge thing. Honestly, I think if it were a less capable lawyer than Bugliosi, they might not have gotten that conviction.
On the prosecution side,
Yeah,
yeah,
because Manson was not at um, the first scene. He was not at the Tate scene or the Hinman scene. Oh, wait, he
they
was there, but he
he
wasn't there for the murder
he was
at
not
the
at the
Hinman
Tate
scene.
scene at all.
No,
Yeah,
he was at the La Bianca scene
yes,
too,
yes.
but that just makes it so much harder.
So
And yeah, as you were saying, Bugliosi really drove that point home of this association
yeah,
with the songs and this crazy mythology. Um,
one of the things that he did to sort of condition his people to do his bidding was that he would have them go out to people's homes and break in
Yep.
and not take anything and not hurt anybody, but they would very quietly rearrange the furniture and then
Yep.
leave.
He called it creepy crawling.
Yeah. And
Like,
and of course the people's when they woke up were freaked the fuck out as anybody would be.
oh,
Uh,
absolutely.
but it's not a priority case that any no cop's going to follow up on that shit, right? Because nothing was taken,
Yep.
nothing was broken, nothing was harmed. It was like a considered a prank, but it was
Hmm.
training people to break into houses and to do his bidding.
Yes. That was how it started, and that's how their training started. In a huge way was that, and then Manson teaching them about knives and firearms at Spawn Ranch. In fact, one of the later charges after all this goes down that the police used to bring them in was a machine gun possession charge. It was that and Grand Theft Auto that
Yes,
ultimately did him in.
yes,
But yeah, they got to that, and as we said, the anger and the jealousy, I think, and the guilt, or not the guilt, the greed and the jealousy just was boiling more and more in Manson. And finally, on the night of August 8th, going into August 9th, he gets a few of them in a car and he gives Tex Watson the target and they drive to Cielo Drive. And it starts going down.
yeah. So yeah,
But
again, it's targeting whoever the fuck lives at the house. He doesn't know. He doesn't care.
no, not at all. He said to the family, what we got to do is show the black people how to start this helter
Yes,
skelter, this race
yes,
war.
yes. That's an excellent point to bring up. He wanted the race war, so he was going to take his gang of white people and commit murders and pin it on black people in the hopes of starting a race war. That was his goal.
Yes, and that was it. But yeah, that first night of August 8th, they get Tex Watson as the driver. Linda Kasabian is in the car. I don't think we talked a bit about her history. She came out to California with her husband in 68, and their relationship started going downhill. So she takes her daughter and flees and finds the family, and they take her in. Um, but she is going to prove to be very pivotal in ways that the others
Yes.
weren't
Yeah.
when we get further along here. So you
Somehow
get
she
Texas.
had a different mentality than the rest.
She did. I think. I don't know if it was her being there, not as long as the other people, or if she was just mentally tougher, as it proved out. Um,
I think definitely she was that. It may not have been the whole story, but she was definitely, she was able to hold on to her self, her
mhm,
selfness, her selfhood, however you want to call it, her identity, her
absolutely.
sense of self. She did not completely lose it into the group dynamic.
Oh, absolutely. Bugliosi, he really summed it up about her when he said that she was cut from a different cloth than the family.
Yes,
That was his exact words for Kasabian.
which
But
was one of the things that saved her from prison because
yes,
she wasn't just well, we'll save that.
yeah, yeah, we'll definitely save that. But yeah, you have Tex in the vehicle, Linda in the vehicle, Susan Atkins, and then Patricia Krenwinkel.
So
And
yeah, Gypsy and what was the other girl's nickname? I forget.
Susan Atkins was Sadie.
Sadie.
That was another big thing that he would do for manipulation in the cult. Your name was whatever the hell Charlie called you.
Ah,
And Sadie, Susan Atkins got that name again going back to the White Album, Sexy Sadie, that
yeah.
song. But yeah, they get in the car that night. They all take in speed before they go out. Methamphetamine basically in pill
Yep.
form.
Yep.
So it's not just LSD this night. It's something that's gonna amp you up, and that's gonna be vital when we get to the crime scene. So
I'm
Tex
holding. I'm
drives.
holding. I'm just dying to click that slideshow, but I'm waiting.
We'll get there.
I know.
We will absolutely get there.
I'm just. Yeah, I want to click that.
Yep. Um, but yeah, they ultimately get there, and it's a winding drive. And that's the thing about LA. It's a very geographically dispersed city. It was built around the idea of the car, basically. So you have, so many people
Hmm.
just way geographically dispersed. And
Yes.
so they drive to Cielo Drive, and
It's in the hills. It's in the
1050,
hills.
yes, the Hollywood Hills. They get there, and it's gated. You can't see the residents beyond the gate unless the gate's open.
But you can
So,
get around it
oh
on
yeah,
foot.
absolutely. But the first thing that they do when they get there, Tex gets out of the car, climbs the pole, and cuts the telephone wire to the house. And this is around midnight on August 9th when he does that. And the way that we have the timeline there, Sharon Tate's sister, Deborah Tate, was 16 at the time. She
Yeah.
was supposed to stay at Cielo Drive that night.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But for whatever reason, when she talked to Sharon on the phone at about 11:30 on the night of August 8th, Sharon said, "Stay home." And she wasn't sure why, but there was still a pretty nasty heat wave going through LA that night. It was about 92 degrees still at night there.
Mm.
Um, so that may have been the reason, but yeah. So there's the actress Sharon Tate at the house, who is 8 months pregnant, by the way. She is there with celebrity hairstylist Jay Sebring, who was also her fiance um, at one time. And they broke it off, but they stayed friends. And Jay came by basically to keep her company because she's pregnant. And Roman Polanski, the director, is off in Europe working on a film at the time and was expected home in maybe 3 days maximum. So she's there. Jay Sebring is there. Wojciech Frykowski, a Pole, is there. He was actually brought to America by Roman Polanski, who a bit of his background, he is Polish. He went through the Second World War and the
Which
Holocaust.
we're talking about Roman?
Yes,
Yes.
Roman. And his experiences going through the Second World War and the Holocaust before he got to America to make films really shaped him. And he did what he could to bring other Polish talent
Hmm.
across, to Hollywood. I think that would be at the time when Poland was under the Iron Curtain, wasn't it?
When did he come? When was that? Did he
It
get
would
here?
have been it, I think it was the 50s when he
Yes.
got.
Then
So
yes. So
they would
he
have
is.
been under the Iron Curtain.
So
Yeah.
he lived through the Holocaust and the had to escape the over or under or around the Iron Curtain, both.
Yes. Both of
So
those.
this is no, you know,
This is a guy
wilting
with a
flower.
spine.
This is a guy
Yeah.
with some sand,
With
right?
some metal in him. Absolutely. And he did what he could to help other Polish talent. And Frykowski was one of those who Polanski thought he was good enough as a director and writer to bring him over, but he really wasn't going anywhere at the time. So he's staying at the house as well at Cielo Drive. And he is there with his girlfriend, the heiress to Folger's Coffee, Abigail Folger.
Okay.
and they are all there.
So that's
And
what, five people at the house?
that is four in the
Four.
house.
Four in the house.
And then
Okay.
you have the fifth was Stephen
Yes.
Parent.
This is
A
one that makes no sense to me.
in what regard?
It was so unnecessary. And,
To kill him?
yes. All right. So what happens is that oh, what's his name? The what's the name of the guy who
Tex Watson?
Tex. So
Hmm.
Tex cuts the phone lines, and then he goes up to the driveway, and here
Hmm.
comes a car. Now,
Yes.
all he's got to do is just fucking wait.
It's
Two
just wait and
sec,
hide.
just wait and hide. The kid drives by,
Hmm.
none the wiser, right?
Yeah, and
What
for a little bit of context there, Stephen Parent was driving to visit the person in the guest house at Cielo Drive.
wasn't that
It
like
was,
the maintenance guy or something like that?
yeah, caretaker,
Yeah.
basically. But yeah, Tex is out there, and he comes up in his car, Stephen Parent does. Tex blindsides him on the driver's side,
Yeah.
puts four slugs into him, which is, arguably overkill with something like that, too. And that would be something I think you might be able to attribute to the speed they took.
Yeah. It's and he was what, 18, something like that?
Maximum
Yeah.
16 to
16 to
18.
18. He was a kid. And all
Yeah,
Tex had to do was just hide behind a tree, and the kid in 2 seconds the kid would have been past, and off they go to do the rest of their mayhem. But
yeah,
he stops the kid and blasts him with 4 rounds.
yes. And then takes the gun with him as he and the rest of the people in the car go up to
I
the
mean,
house.
that's fucking asshole move.
Yeah. Hey, do we want to bring up that slideshow now?
Yeah.
Might be a good time. But yeah, again, a warning with this. This is very graphic.
Yeah, there are actual crime scene photos coming up
Yeah,
into
these
the
are
slideshow.
actual crime scene photos from the Tate scene. There is Sharon Tate with J.C. Bring. The body's being drug out the day after. But yeah, they all make their way in, and what they were going to do to start it off was tie all of them up in that main living area in the house. And what they were going to do was hang them, all three of them, from the rafter. But what happened was Frykowski and Abigail Folger somehow managed to escape. So what does Tex do?
Oh,
He goes after him.
uh, so Kelly wants to know why this house. And we mentioned it earlier, but just to reiterate, this was the house that uh, the record producer had lived in when he rejected Manson when he didn't want to sign him,
Terry Melcher. Yep.
Milcher. And again, he was Doris Day's son, and he had lived in this house at the time. But then, by the time that Manson returned to try to talk Milcher into giving him another chance, he had
He had
moved,
moved out. Yep.
and Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski had moved in.
They had.
Yeah, and it's a bizarre reason to hit this house. It you
It
know it
really is.
and you can almost have an easier time understanding a random selection.
Yep. And you really could, also considering that their main goal was, again, to start
A
this
race war.
race war.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they get in there, and as I said, they were going to hang the house's people up on like a noose that was rigged for three or four of them. and
Right.
they draped it
They
over the rafter
they
in the
did
room.
they did string them up
They did.
initially, but not enough to hang them, but just enough to um, subdue,
Hmm.
to isolate them. I mean, confine, keep them from moving around.
Yes. Yeah, they had gotten there, and Frykowski, as I said, managed to escape and start running at the back. So Tex goes after him, shoots him twice, stabs him, get this, 51 times.
Yeah,
51 times.
out by the pool. Yep.
Yes, yes. So they get there, and yeah, they leave him there, and he also whips him twice. Then somehow Abigail Folger also makes her way out to the lawn in her nightgown. She's stabbed a total of 29 times by Patricia Krenwinkel. And the thing that got me about this, one of the more upsetting details, when she was
Yeah.
in the car with all of them after, she was bitching that her hand hurt because she had stabbed her so deep she was hitting bone. 29 times. There is the main scene. You
Yes.
had Sharon Tate on the inside in there. Um, yeah, she was killed principally by Susan Atkins, stabbed a total of 16 times, with 5 of her wounds being sufficient in and of themselves to kill her. And then they strung her up. And the other thing with that was Susan Atkins had the idea of cutting out the baby from her body. But for whatever reason, they didn't do that.
I remember as a kid hearing about this, and the urban legend that was passed around between the kids was that that had actually happened.
Hmm. You know what? As far as I could tell from the actual details of it, and just to um, let people know, I consider Bugliosi's book Helter Skelter to be the definitive source on that,
Hmm.
being as he was the prosecutor. He said they didn't do it.
Right.
But
According to Linda, I think it was,
mhm,
Sharon had begged for her baby's life, not her own, but for her baby's life, and that she was told, "I have no mercy for you."
that is it. That is what they said. Just man, I shudder just looking at it again. But then you also had Jay Sebring stabbed 7 times, shot once, and he and Sharon both had rope burns on their bodies from that. And they tried to string them up, as he said, from that rafter. And
Right.
before they left, I think it was Susan Atkins again, dipped a towel in Sharon Tate's blood and wrote pig on the main door, the main back door to the residence. Yeah, R.C. Mulher says in reference to Helter Skelter, excellent read. I've read it, horrifying but well written. I definitely agree with that. And Bugliosi's lead in for the book is this story will scare the hell out of you.
Yeah, and honest to God, this is the kind of person that inspired the title of this podcast. Um,
Hmm.
because the real monsters are not, animals, they're people.
Yes, I couldn't agree more with that. But yeah, so they did that and they left that night and went back to Spawn Ranch. Oh, and we had forgotten about Gary Hinman in that timeline.
Yeah,
It was sort of related, but not totally related.
it was
About
it was the significant thing about him, besides, the tragic loss of a life, was that it was the point where Manson knew he could order his people to kill.
Yes, it was the Hinman killing that basically got them able to do that. That house that was the one with the garage below in black and white, that picture was the Hinman house. They
Ah,
had gone there on July 26th. Um, Hinman had some loose connections with the family. He was their drug dealer, for one. But they went there, they tied him up, and basically were going to shake him down for whatever money they could get. And Manson takes a sword there and he actually cuts off Hinman's ear. Kind of another biblical parallel
but
there.
doesn't kill him personally.
Yeah, Manson did not kill him. He cuts off his ear and he leaves. And he sends in Bobby Beausoleil, was the man who actually killed Hinman.
Oh, and interestingly, cunningly, I should say, Manson didn't even tell Bobby to kill him.
Yeah,
He
no,
said
he didn't.
he said you know what to do or something to that effect.
Yeah, when Bobby called him and said he's got no money, what do I do? And they ended up actually taking 2 vehicles that he had. But they also, before they left and killed him, they left the Black Panther's paw print in his blood on the wall. And then they wrote Political Piggy.
Yeah.
But somehow it took the cops a while to connect this with the Tate house about 12 days later. Uh,
Well, they didn't even have computers.
oh, no, not at all. Not at all. But another interesting thing about Beausoleil, he had actually worked with noted underground director Kenneth Anger. Have you ever read Hollywood Babylon, SK?
I have not.
Excellent, excellent book summarizing the depravity and scandals of Hollywood from its foundation to, basically the
How
day it
many
was written in the 70s.
how many volumes is it?
Two. Yeah, there's two. There's Hollywood Babylon and Hollywood Babylon 2. I have both first editions on my shelf over there, but
It would
yeah,
probably need to be many more now.
yeah. But Beausoleil had worked with Kenneth Anger on an underground film about Satan.
Yeah.
He actually played Satan in this, and he did the music for it. And Anger was turning a little bit of a profit from showing the prints around Hollywood, and he had them locked up in his office. So what does Manson do? He sends the family there to burglarize it. They steal the main print of the movie,
Oh,
and
really?
then they go back to Anger's office and ransom it for $10,000. Yeah,
Well, he's
and what?
just a fucking criminal from the
Yeah.
that's his foundation, right? This is
Oh,
not an
absolutely.
aberration for him. It's just an escalation.
Yeah, oh yeah. Well, and what I loved about Anger's answer to it was basically, I don't negotiate with terrorists. 40, 50 years before they even had that with George Bush. So he
Nice.
told him to go to hell with it. And luckily, he actually found another print of it that he didn't know he had.
Well, that's good.
So, yeah, there's that interesting little tie in there. But yeah, Beausoleil actually gets picked up in bloody clothes in one of the cars that he took from Gary Hinman.
Yeah.
He gets picked up by the LAPD, and he's in jail before the Tate murders
Wow.
on this crime. So,
Interesting. And that actually comes into play later um, with Linda.
yes,
But we'll
that does.
I'm not gonna spoil that little tidbit.
Yeah,
Just
we'll get to
foreshadow
that.
that. It's a little foreshadow.
Yeah, but it
All right.
was the oh yeah, go ahead.
So okay. So Bobby gets picked up for the Hinman murder, and he goes to jail.
Yes. Yeah, he's sitting in the LA County jail for it.
And Charlie's not all that happy with the Tate murders, right?
No. He says it was too messy, in his words.
Yeah.
So what did they do on the night of August 10th?
he
They go
wants
looking again.
he wants to show him how it's done.
Yep.
Now
So,
so they go out, right? Again, doped up.
mhm,
Is it the same
yep.
crew as
It
before
is.
with
It is
Charlie?
different.
Oh, is it?
Charlie's in the car.
Okay.
Um, Tex was also in there, but then you had Linda Kasabian, and with this one, Leslie Van Houten, who was the other
The prom
Manson
queen.
girl. Yes. So they go out looking, and they end up at 3301 Waverly Drive in the Los Feliz neighborhood of LA,
Now,
which is,
did this house have any significance?
well, the interesting thing about it, the reason that they went there, they used to spend time in the neighboring house with the occupant who lived there dropping acid and smoking weed, like a year or two before. So they go to that house and nobody's there. It's abandoned. So what do? They go next door to the home of Lino and Rosemary LaBianca, which Lino was a proprietor of several rather successful LA grocery stores.
Okay.
And his wife had it was a thrift shop, if I'm not mistaken, or something close to that. So she was a business owner too. And they stop. The first thing that they do is Manson says, "I'm going to show you how it's done." Gets out of the car, goes in, and ties the couple up in the main room of that house. And then he leaves with Linda Kasabian and leaves the rest of them there to basically do the deed. I'm not sure why he did that. If he was going to show him how it was done, wouldn't you think he'd want to see it? Unless he knew that that was going to make it harder to tie that murder to them if he wasn't at the scene when it actually happened. I'm not totally sure.
Yeah. Well, I, I think it's his way of trying to keep his hands clean, right?
Yeah,
So they can't
it,
pin it on him.
this is true. Most likely that was it. But yeah, they go in, the rest of the crew, and they end up stabbing Rosemary a total of 41 times. This is Leslie Van Houten, stabbing her a total of 41 times. 28 of the wounds were pre-mortem, 13 of them were post-mortem.
Jeez.
Yeah, so she really took a punishing. And Van Houten, a little bit later after this in court, says, "The more I stabbed, the more fun it was." And Bugliosi, he pointed that out too. This is a crime that was done with relish,
Yeah.
with enjoyment, with passion in what they're doing, which is just sick. Um, and poor Lino, he's stabbed 26 times, and they ended up using a fork and a knife to carve the word war into his stomach. And this is that tie into the Piggies song from the White Album. It talks about the piggies eating dinner.
Right.
So, yeah, they do that. They leave the fork and knife sticking in his body after carving those words. Death to pies, Kelly says.
Well, it's just the font they used, Kelly.
Yeah, the blood font.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they take their blood and they write what you're seeing around that house. And the group showers, eats something out of the fridge, and hitchhikes back to Spawn Ranch.
Jesus.
Yeah. And throughout this, um, an interesting thing again with Linda, Charlie gave her instructions while the LaBiancas were being murdered the night of the 10th to go and meet an actor that she had met on the beach. And her instructions were, "You're going to slit his throat when he opens the door." That's it.
This is same night?
Yes, the
Yeah.
same night. And they go to the apartment building and do that, and Manson leaves her and Tex there. Or no, it just leaves her
No,
there.
Tex is there.
Watches a little.
Tex is there.
Oh, Tex was?
Yeah.
I'm getting my timeline confused a bit there. But yeah, so they do that, and Kasabian, to her credit, fouls the plan by going to the wrong door in the apartment building, purposely going to the wrong door and ringing the bell. Because by this time, she is totally freaked out. Remember, she did not go into the house on Cielo Drive.
Either place.
She stood. No, no, she didn't go into Cielo Drive or Waverly or the
Yeah.
La Bianca house. She basically stood there frozen for both of them. But yeah, she had the presence of mind to do that. And Tex finally says, okay, he's not home. Let's go, somewhere else. Let's go back to the ranch.
Right.
So yeah, there would have been another murder that night, if not for her.
So, Jesus, what a couple of days these guys had.
Yeah, attempting their great Armageddon.
And
Their race.
nobody fell for it.
No, although too, something that did happen with that. In the days after the bodies were discovered on Cielo Drive in Waverly, there was a panic throughout pretty much all of LA. Sales of guard dogs went up,
Yeah.
for one. Sales of guns went up, and the revenues of private security firms went up.
Well, because
A lot after.
it just seemed completely random.
Absolutely.
Well, and in the Lobianca, it absolutely was a random assassination.
Yep.
Um,
Absolutely.
there was so anybody could have been the next target. You can't,
Anyone.
it's not like Son of Sam where you could, the girls were out, coloring their hair to not be targets, right? To
Mm-hmm.
not fit a profile. There's no profile. There's no fucking profile.
No discernible pattern whatsoever that they could have put their finger on at all. But yeah, and they did manage to cause that level of panic throughout a city of, a couple million people at the time. And they did actually have a hit list that they were going to work their way down if this would have gone on longer than it did. It included Steve McQueen was on it, the Bullet
Wow.
Steve
What?
McQueen. Yeah, he was on their hit list at that time. Frank Sinatra was another one.
You sent me a picture of
I'm
Paul
not
Newman. Why is that?
Paul Newman. That picture was actually Jay Sebring doing his hair on the set of, I think it was Cool Hand Luke,
Ah.
1967.
Jay Sebring is credited as being the innovator of men's hairstyles.
He really was.
Because before that, men just got haircuts. There was no fucking styling. You went to a barber, you got your hair shortened. That was it.
Yep. Absolutely.
And I remember that changing as a young teenager. That suddenly the guys could go get their hair styled and not just cut. It was a big deal.
Oh, absolutely. I was just looking at the look on Newman's face there. I wonder if it's from what he's reading or if he's a little puzzled to be getting his hair styled.
Notice the army trucks in the background.
Yep. Kelly is still wondering what the rock was. Sorry we didn't talk about that. That was a famous picture from, I think it was Rolling Stone, was there before the murders, profiling the group for their magazine, and they took a famous picture of all the Manson girls under it. And it was also where Charlie would do a lot of his preaching. Does that answer your question, Kelly?
Yes, it does. I'm going to answer for
Well, let's hope so. But yeah, after this, like we said, both still in prison at this time for the Hinman murder. and the rest of the family is out. And I think they were getting a little bit they were feeling the pressure of knowing that they did that and maybe they're going to get arrested. Um, it was at this time that Linda, after being asked by Charlie to go see Beausoleil in prison and to find out what he told the cops, Linda decides instead to make a break for it, to leave the family and go to New Mexico.
But
So that's,
she has to do a very hard thing though.
yes, she has to leave her daughter there with the family.
Can you imagine being put in that position?
I can't. I mean, when
I
you
I
know that these people, you know what they're capable of,
well,
and you have to leave your 1-year-old daughter there.
so to put it in context, it's not just that they've killed these grown-ups. There's stories of them killing babies on the ranch.
Yes, yes.
Um,
I
so
didn't
there,
read any of those. I'm curious what you found with that.
so one of the people who, a woman who was not a member of the family but did some, I don't know, manual labor for him, like cleaning up or something like that, um, found a dead baby in the woods on the ranch
Oh, oh wow.
and
Damn.
went and told Charlie about it, and he said, "Well, we'll just put it with the others."
Oh shit. Man, that's one of those things where you don't know if he's fucking with you when he says that or if it was real.
Well,
Man.
the story goes that they would, in a kind of a Spartan-esque uh, test, they would take babies and leave them out to the elements to see if they were strong enough to survive.
Oh my god. Wow. Dang. That's unbelievable. I wonder if anybody's ever done like a forensic archaeological dig of Spawn Ranch.
Uh, a few times.
Really?
Yeah.
And
But it's privately owned now, and it's difficult to get the owner's permission to do much work there.
mhm. Wow. Man. Yeah, Kelly says a Sermon on the Mount type stuff with that rock.
Yeah.
Plus the whole Peter being the rock. Yeah, like
Right.
we said, there's quite a few biblical tie-ins. Revolution number
Well,
9 on the White
I
Album
mean,
with Revelation
if you're
chapter 9.
Christ, there would be.
Oh yeah. Well, I found like even cutting Himmon's ear off could be seen as one
Right?
too. So yeah, that is definitely interesting. If you think you're Christ and the devil wrapped up into one, uh, man. So yeah, they're out, and they actually the ranch ends up getting raided on a weapons charge where they supposedly had an illegal full auto machine gun and a few stolen cars. So the LAPD raids the place on that, and that's where most of them get arrested. But they didn't break the La Bianca and Tate murder cases until Susan Atkins was in jail
Blabbed.
with them. Yeah, she ended up blabbing to her cellmate, saying, "Oh yeah, that was us, the family. We killed Sharon Tate." So,
And the cellmate who is like, dude, I can get out early for this information,
yeah.
runs to prosecutors as anybody would, and
Oh,
said,
absolutely.
and that's what got the ball rolling on prosecuting the family in Manson for Tate and LaBianca.
Yep. And that's another thing to stress there. When Vincent Bugliosi was handed these cases, he was debating about how to charge Charles Manson because it was incredibly hard because he didn't physically participate in the murders
And he didn't
to get
tell
that
anybody
charge.
to commit murder. He was
Right.
very, very careful about that.
Yes. Honestly, I think if this were in the hands of a less agile legal mind, that it probably would have gone next to nowhere with Manson.
Could have maybe argued conspiracy on its own, but he had a star witness, didn't he?
He did. The star witness there was Linda Kasabian, of all people.
Yeah.
Linda came back to LA and they offered her immunity for her testimony against the family.
Plus, she got her daughter back.
Yep. So that's the route she took.
So the fact that Manson gave Linda the order to go visit, was it Bobby in jail,
Yep.
proved his undoing.
Yep.
Because he didn't know that she was not 100% under his thumb.
Oh,
She's
absolutely.
she had maintained enough of her identity to escape and then testify.
Mm-hmm. And to help bring the bastard down.
Yep.
Like Bugliosi said, man, she's cut from a different cloth than the rest of them.
And she's still in hiding, by the way.
She is 50 years later. There's people who were still sort of out for blood with her, even though she didn't participate much beyond, driving these people around. She did that first night. And, she didn't even know that that was what they were going to do when they went to
Right.
Cielo Drive. She didn't know it was murder on their minds.
No.
So, but yeah, they ended up all getting the death penalty from
But
that, and sentences were commuted to
yeah.
life when
Didn't it,
California got rid of it, got
yeah,
rid
they
of the
got
death
rid of the death
penalty.
penalty.
Was that 72? I didn't think it was long after.
Yeah. It
'Cause-
was fucked up 70s probably. I mean, if I'm not a fan of the death penalty because they get it wrong so often, but I
I
wouldn't have
agree.
cried any tears over this one.
I wouldn't have either with Manson. I could see a little bit of a mitigating factor with the women. I think life was probably the best thing there. They should never get parole, in my
No,
opinion. And they do come up basically every couple of years for parole. And Deborah Tate, to her credit,
she's
is an
probably
unwielding voice against that.
yeah, yeah. I can imagine she would be there every single fucking time.
She is, and she's done a lot for other victims of violent crimes. Um, she follows me with her official profile on Twitter.
No
I've
kidding.
talked with her a bit. Yep, she's great, man. And a real hero in all this. And to think that she almost became one of the victims that night.
Wow, that has got to be tough to live with.
Yeah,
I mean,
I can't even imagine.
that's like being the sole survivor of a plane crash.
Oh, absolutely. And Quentin Tarantino, to his credit, bef- before he started in on the actual filming and principal photography of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, he took the script to Deborah and she read it and
Oh,
liked it.
oh, good, good for him.
Yeah, I thought that showed a lot of class. And I won't spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen it, but Margaret Robbie is fantastic as Sharon Tate in it.
I'm glad they found somebody. Because when I was hearing about this, I was like, who the hell are they gonna find that's got the same kind of qualities as Sharon Tate? Because she was she was not just beautiful. I mean, she was beautiful. There's no
Oh,
question
yeah.
about that. But by all accounts, she was a wonderful person,
Oh, yeah.
and it shone through on her performances.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
um, but she had this almost airy quality to her. Her performances, just this
She
light,
really did.
breezy countenance. Um, It's just really difficult for, I think, for a lot of modern day actresses to portray that.
Oh yeah, I mean, really, it is. And she was just a great person by all accounts with that. And on listening to Deborah talk about her, and getting back to a bit to Roman Polanski,
Yes.
in Deborah Tate's words, he crumbled when he heard about the murders being still in Europe. He crumbled.
Imagine this. I mean, imagine this guy's life. The
Going,
Holocaust,
yeah,
the Iron Curtain, success in Hollywood following that, marrying what has to be considered a, his dream
oh
beyond
yeah,
dream girls, and having a baby weeks from being born,
yes,
and all
and then
of that
having it all
mowed
snatched away.
down in the most brutal possible way. And
I
that's
just, man,
and
can't
that
imagine.
I- there's there an argument could be made that he never recovered from that. He has never recovered from that. And I don't know how you would.
I fully agree. And I know that people like to bag on him for stuff that he's done since then, certain sexual indiscretions,
Hmm.
but I've always taken great pity on the man because of what he had to go through with the Manson murders.
My gripe with him was him skipping town.
Yeah,
That was kind
yeah,
of
I
a
mean
chicken
that.
shit move.
Yeah, I mean I'm not absolving him at all. I'm not saying he's a
No.
saint, but I'm just saying I do take some pity on him because of that.
Yeah, I mean, has to have gone through some madness that, you know, it's just unimaginable.
Yeah, Kelly says indiscretion. If I'm not mistaken, it was Roman Polanski with an underage girl in, what was that, 78
Yeah.
when it occurred? And he ended up going to Switzerland and staying there before he was brought up on charges.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was a lot of people's gripe with him. But, yeah, also during the trial, they ended up carving X's and then swastikas in their heads that the girls did after Charlie did it, which is kind of interesting. It almost shows that they were incapable of aiding in their own defense, to me,
Well,
because
that's an interesting argument.
again, Bugliosi's case rested almost totally upon look at the level of control that this man is exerting over them, and then they essentially prove his point by their behavior during the trial.
Yeah. But they took steps to. Yeah. I mean, they knew what they did was wrong, even if they enjoyed it. They knew that it was wrong. They took steps to cover their tracks. Um, things like that. Throwing the weapons away.
Oh yeah,
That kind of shit. You know.
yeah, absolutely. They still did all that, but I was just going to share the article I wrote on Sharon Tate in the chat. And the link for that is in the chat. I would appreciate sharing on your socials if people wouldn't mind.
Yeah.
This is
By
a
the way,
new site I'm at.
if you haven't read um, Wes's article on Sharon Tate, it's awesome. Take
Thank
time
you.
to read it. And I'm glad you got a new home that appreciates you.
Yeah. Yeah, my old place is closing down in December. So I'm moving anything and everything of substance that I want staying for a long time to this new site that I'm doing film for. Um,
Well, I wrote a few things for the old site, but I wouldn't call them items of substance.
oh, they definitely were. I'm looking into a site that will actually save
Oh,
a lot
nice.
of the stuff there. So what I'll do with that, because they allow an option where I think it was up to like 2,000 entries can be saved. I'll just group yours in with mine, and we could still have them somewhere for people to look at. Patty.
Yeah.
OMG, I'm adding myself to the monster list. Y'all talking about killings, and here I am screaming, die, damn it, to this spider bigger than me. That was as horrifying as your shows. You know, I've never totally understood the fear of spiders. To me, because they're helpful, you know,
Well, because
controlling bugs.
they can move suddenly and without
This is
warning in
true.
any direction. They can even hop and they sneak around and they've got all these legs and eyes and pincers and shit.
Yeah, it really is. Man, I was just thinking about that because, again, Woodstock was only 1 week after Sharon Tate was murdered. So
Wow.
you have what's essentially the Love Generation's id running rampant. And as Joan Didion said in her quote, the 70s ended abruptly on the night of August 8th through 9th, 1969. Or the 60s ended, I'm sorry, and the 70s began that night. So
Go
you have that.
70s. Woohoo!
Oh, go darkness and despair of the 1970s. It's a hell of a way to ring in the decade. But yeah, you have that, and then you have this sort of ultimate symbol of the Love Generation in Woodstock happening just a week after. Um,
Yeah.
if people get a chance, go to PBS.
By the way,
Their latest,
Woodstock was a shithole, literally a shithole.
yeah, I was just going to say on PBS, their show American Experience, the newest episode there right now is 2 hours on Woodstock. It's really interesting to see. I watched it the
It's a
other night.
lovely little whitewash.
Yeah. And it's one thing, though, to see even just for the music.
Oh, the music was undeniably good. Except for
Oh,
who the
yeah.
fuck gives Bob Dylan a microphone? Jesus Christ, stop doing that. Let him just write
uh,
songs. Fine, great, do that, Bobby.
oh, absolutely. You know, and talking about the music again with that Beatles tie in with Charles Manson,
Yeah.
I don't think people remember it enough that the Beatles actually knew Roman Polanski and Sharon Tate personally.
Oh, I didn't know that.
They ran in the same circles in London at their London flat,
Ah,
which was sort of their
yeah.
second
That
home when they were in Europe.
I didn't real.
So,
I missed that part. That's cool in a way.
y-
I mean,
and then
interesting connection.
I can't even imagine the what would go through your mind knowing that you wrote Helter Skelter and that it was used in such a way. Which, by the way, have you ever looked into the origin of that song?
No.
It's really interesting. Paul McCartney was reading an article about how Pete Townsend wrote Magic Bus, Pete Townsend of The Who,
Yeah.
and
Is there another?
he oh yeah, this is true. Um, yeah, a guy known for smashing his guitar on stage, but yeah, he's reading this article about it, and Pete's just, going on and on about his huge drive to write, and McCartney, for whatever reason, thought, hey, I can do it better. And he writes Helter Skelter
Wow.
out of that. And by the way, the original meaning of it is just in English seesaw. That's all the song is about, coming
Ab-
from the guy who
about a
wrote it.
what?
A seesaw. Basically, a toy
A
that
teeter
children would go
totter.
to at the carnival. Yeah,
Oh
a
my
teeter
word.
top. That is literally all it's about, according to McCartney.
Wow.
Who, and I take his word over anybody else's with that.
If he wrote the song, he's should be the authority on its meaning.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that of any piece of art. But yeah, if you guys want to hear that music, if you go to our Facebook page, I actually put together a psychedelic playlist for this that has a bunch of it on there. And I put together a separate playlist for the Beatles and Manson,
Mm.
and a still separate one of the Beach Boys and Manson. And a part of that we didn't go into with the Beach Boys, with Dennis Wilson and Manson, they actually ended up using a song by Charlie, more or less. The song Never Learn Not to Love. It was credited to Wilson, but it's basically just a rejig of Manson's Girl Cease to Exist. That's the name of the song. Manson's song.
Oh,
They basically took it and they rejigged it. So
did he
yeah,
get
Charles
royalties?
Manson wrote a Beach Boys song. No, no,
Good.
no, he's not mentioned at all with that. But yeah, yeah, Charles Manson wrote a Beach Boys song. I mean, I still love those guys as a group, but man, it just has a totally weird air to know
Yeah.
that, you know. So
Very strange stuff. Brian Wilson was a big ass weirdo all on his own. Kind of a savant, music savant kind of guy. Very
Dennis,
strange.
you mean?
No, Brian.
Oh, okay.
Brian Wilson was a very strange, reclusive kind of guy. Um,
It's kind of interesting that he didn't take to Manson; that it was Dennis who did for a time.
yeah, it is interesting. Um,
But
so, Charlie died in prison, right?
he did in 2017.
Not, yeah. He never got parole.
No.
I can't imagine being on any parole board that would vote him to have parole.
Oh,
Jesus.
absolutely.
Or any of
Yeah,
the girls either. But what about Tex? What happened? Is he still in prison?
he is. I'm not sure. I think he might have died about maybe 10 years ago. I'd have to look that up.
Okay.
But he died in prison too. And then Bobby Beausoleil is still in prison. He's
And then
actually making music in prison.
oh,
Beausoleil.
in the footsteps of his master.
If anybody would get parole, I would think it would be him.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, because he was only
but
involved in one killing.
yeah, yeah. Let's see. No, I guess Tex is still alive. Huh. I'll be darned. Yeah, he's still in prison. Charles Tex Watson. Yeah, Manson died and may rot in hell now. And some interesting news with that. Zach Bagans of Ghost Adventures actually bought the La Bianca house recently.
My understanding is that the Tate house was bought and um, bulldozed to put in a new house.
Was it?
That's
Yeah.
my understanding. The, the property is still there, but it's an entirely different house.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I'd like to see that one. Yeah, Kelly says Manson made an album in prison. That he did. Um, Luckily, damn near nobody bought it.
So one of the things we're going to do as a follow up are the supposed uh, additional murders by the Manson family that they were not convicted
Yes.
of. As
One of those is pictured there, Donald Shea. He was a stuntman who was on Spawn Ranch, and he basically went to George and said, "You need to get rid of these people." Shortly, I think, after the murders, he didn't know that they did them,
mm,
but yeah, he told them to get rid of it, and then he just sort of disappeared. Donald Shea. So he is mistakenly listed on our graphic there. I should have fixed that, but
it's
he's
okay.
one of them. Then there was another guy off the top of my head who went by the alias Zero, and supposedly Manson confided in this guy about what they did, and then the narrative goes that they were playing Russian roulette, and that's how he died. But again, they're not sure.
Ah, So
Yeah.
one of the ladies in prison said that they had killed upwards of 30 people in total. Over
Hmm.
over 30 people total. But again, no bodies, no bones, no evidence, just hearsay.
Yep.
But we will, on a future episode, we will cover those rumors,
We are. We're going to dive into just that part of it.
just that part, um, the additional, um, the extended track of the Manson family.
Manson Family reprise. Yeah, man. There's literally so much info there. And just to give people a bit of perspective there, usually when I prepare for one of these shows, I have about maybe maximum 10 pages of written information.
Yeah,
And for just this episode, I have half of a legal pad
Jesus.
covered on both
There's
sides with
s-
notation.
so much information. Okay, fuck, Kelly, Jesus. Squeaky From.
Squeaky.
Squeaky
Uh,
From was a Manson girl who
mhm.
ass- made an attempt on President Gerald Ford's life and went to prison
Yes.
for it. But this was had to have been years
Later.
later because Ford
Yeah.
wasn't president until
76, I think. Wasn't
yeah,
he? Or was it
yes.
a bit earlier? Yeah. Uh,
Don't apologize, Kelly. We love your enthusiasm.
and yes, RC says, didn't his
75.
man. Oh, okay. Yes, one of the Manson defense attorneys disappeared under mysterious circumstances during the trial, was never seen again. And also, interestingly enough, with that, there was, I think, three other attorneys who um, went they went crazy basically and went into jail for a time, like temporary insanity. And just to show you how
Defense
infectious this was
attorneys?
during the trial, yeah, defense attorneys were jailed during the trial. And just
Jesus.
to show you how explosive this was, when Bugliosi had Susan Atkins on the stand, he actually took a swing at her and said, little bitch, in open court in front of the jury. He did
Jesus.
that. And again, there you're talking about a guy who's known for his calm, his being collected, and a cool, rational, agile, legal mind, and he did that.
You know, I have enough experience to say everybody has somebody who can get the fuck under your skin.
Oh, absolutely.
There's we all
Yeah.
have that person, you know. Hopefully you don't live with them,
Uh,
but everybody has somebody who can get through your defenses and your protections and your training and all that shit and just rattle your
oh,
fucking
I'm sure.
cage.
Oh, I'm sure. And we're talking years before the Manson girls went into any sort of deprogramming,
Yeah.
of the cult instructions that were put into them by Manson. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure it was warranted, but it's just amazing that even he did that. And it's also great that he didn't blow the trial when he did that. That they didn't
Yeah.
declare a mistrial. You know?
Or get censured or, in contempt or anything like that. It's
Oh
probably
yeah.
probably the you know, everybody in the
Yeah.
courtroom was like, "Yeah, I wanted to hit her too."
Oh yeah. Absolutely. He's like, man,
But
that
there
bitch
was
deserved it.
I remember seeing on the nightly news, video of the trial, and that the family members who would show up, it just turned it into a fucking circus, and they would all shave their heads or cut swastikas into their foreheads or and chanting and carrying signs and all this bullshit outside of
Oh
the
yeah.
courtroom.
Yep. Which again totally proved his case. Look at the level of control he has. Um, Kelly asks if any of them went through reprogramming outside of jail. I'm sure Linda Kasabian had a bit of that to do. Definitely, not as much as the other Manson girls. But yeah, 50 years, man. Let's not focus on the murderer. Let's focus on the lives of the victims, like Sharon Tate. Taken from us way too early.
Yep. Okay, I think that kind of wraps us up, right?
I think so.
This was a horrible, horrible series of events
Yes.
that took the very definition of innocent lives.
Oh, yeah. And absolutely. If you need a little bit of a come down after the heaviness of this episode, like I said, go to the Facebook page and I'll put up the playlists of
Yeah,
some of that great music, the psychedelic music,
very
especially.
good music. Very,
Kind of helps emotionally cleanse the palate,
and it's
as it
you
were.
know, it's music has persisted for a long time for a reason.
Absolutely. I did my best to get a good cross section of bands in there, but
All right then. Thank you everybody for the fantastic chat comments and for listening in to this live show. Appreciate you so very much. And you know, if you have friends you don't like very much, be sure to turn them on to our show.
uh,
And
yep.
we will see you next week. I have no idea who we're doing next week yet. So
Yeah, we haven't decided on
we
that
haven't
one
talked
yet.
about that, but it'll be cool.
I still say with the summer killers that we were kind of focusing on, we haven't done Zodiac yet.
Zodiac. It might be Zodiac time. Definitely.
It might be. Yep.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Night all.